I don't know if you know of Dr. James Orr. I would rather you didn't, in a way, but he's an academic who seems to have traded the tranquil, bookish life of a Cambridge scholar for the bombastic world of right-wing politics, all with the casual endorsement of a higher power, or so he might claim. Because, be in no doubts, one way to whitewash nastiness is to say that it comes with the imprimatur of religion. The unlikely setting of this melodrama is Cambridge, a bastion of serene intellectualism where one might... Is intellectualism a word? Where one might imagine scholars pondering the mysteries of the universe, or at least debating whether to pronounce scone or scone. But in struts Dr. Orr, brandishing not a quill, but a proverbial megaphone, apparently convinced that the nation needs a moral compass with a distinctly religious twang. And one might say that he's a curious specimen, part theologian, part philosopher, part, provocateur. He seems intent on using his platform not to guide souls through the labyrinth of existence, but rather to amplify grievances and moral panics. Rainbow activists, he declares, are infiltrating our schools, causing fainting fits from Hampstead to Hackney with their nefarious agenda. Now, I've been to Hampstead, and while it's usually the price of organic humus that causes alarm, perhaps Dr. Orr knows something that I don't. You see, Orr is what happens when philosophy graduates realize there's no money in asking unanswerable questions and instead decide to give a more definite and, I think, probably uncharitable answer to questions that no one asked in the first place. He's found a new pulpit in the form of the National Conservative Conference, where he can preach the virtues of faith, family, flag, and freedom, and I would add foolishness to that list. But, I don't want to be accused of uncharitable alliteration by Suella Braverman or Priti Patel or his erstwhile friends. The good doctor has also managed to link arms with the likes of JDVance, apparently, a man who went from writing a memoir about his hillbilly roots to preaching the gospel of Trumpism with all the fervour of the convert. And all the and clearly all the money to trade up on his attire, on the clothes he wears. Presumably, there's a mysterious Lord Ali lurking in the wings who's put together a nice fund to kit out JDVance so that he looks like a mini-me version of Mr. Trump. Together, Vance and Orr Vance, seem to share a peculiar vision of a world besieged by secularists, cat ladies, and, heaven forfend, socialists. And this odd couple might seem laughable if it weren't for the serious damage that they seem intent on doing in the political arena. But here's the thing about Dr. Orr and his like. For all their talk of tradition and morality, there's a distinct lack of charity and humility in their pronouncements. It's a curious form of religiosity that sees God as a shepherd of love and or that talks of God as a shepherd of love, but presents him as an enforcer of a very narrow and very angry view of society. Orr's Twitter feed, which I discovered this morning, could be mistaken for a very Victorian morality pamphlet, if those pamphlets also contained bizarre, thinly veiled, xenophobic jibes like his notorious "import the Arab world" comment. Yet, despite the controversy, one must concede that he has an astonishing knack for self-promotion. You don't get to be called the British Sherpa of the American right wing without some effort. He's managed to cast himself as the intellectual backbone of a movement that's all too happy to slack an academic veneer on what is essentially a parade of splintering prejudices. But I don't want to get too carried away, and I don't want to make any reference to Farage at this moment. But Dr. Orr is less a philosophical giant and more a tragicomic figure a sort of Hogarthian oaf, a man who has all the trappings of a scholar but has chosen instead to be some sort of political fool, wielding his religion not as a balm for the weary soul but as a bludgeon against those he deems unworthy, a medieval soldier pope. I don't want to draw any parallels between Dr. Orr and the Borgias. I have no idea about his private life, and so we find ourselves in a world where Cambridge dons are not content to discuss the nature of the divine or the essence of being, not content with St. Anselm in the 11th century. No, they are leading conferences filled with anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists and defending policies that would make Torquemada blush. Perhaps Dr. Orr's greatest tragedy is that he's mistaken provocation for profundity and nastiness for righteousness. In the end, one can only hope that Cambridge students with their characteristic wit and disdain for pomposity take Dr. Orr with the pinch of salt that he deserves, as he peppers his own salad with nastiness, with perversity. I'm not going to suggest for 1 minute that people should decamp from Cambridge back to Oxford, but perhaps a glass of something more palatable is called for. Perhaps a little human virtue, perhaps a little kindness. For as long as people like Dr. Orr have their say, it's our duty not so much to listen but to laugh, and then with utmost politeness to show them the door.